Before sunrise settled over South Boston, Ollie's Diner sat half-lit under a flickering neon sign, the kind of place where night shift workers nursed bitter coffee and kept their troubles quiet. Sarah Mitchell moved between tables with practiced calm, though the strain in her shoulders betrayed another sleepless night. At 7:05 a.m. the door opened, and the little girl returned, small, silent, tense. Today her trembling was different. She clutched the edge of the booth, eyes darting toward the street as if expecting something to break through the morning fog. Sarah knelt beside her. "Are you hurt?" The child shook her head, lips barely moving. "He found me." The words hit Sarah harder than the storm outside. She straightened, scanning the rain-blurred windows. Whoever he was, the girl believed he could walk through any door. And for the first time, Sarah felt the air in the diner shift, tightening, warning, promising trouble she wasn't ready for but couldn't run from. What happens when that door finally opens will change everything. Subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales for more stories that keep you holding your breath. The storm outside thickened until the windows of Ollie's Diner rattled under each gust. Sarah felt it before she saw anything, an unease rippling through the small space, the way birds fall silent before a predator appears. The little girl sat rigid in the booth, hands hidden under the table, eyes locked on the street like she was bracing for the world to cave in. Sarah stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Sweetheart, who's coming?" The girl swallowed hard, her voice barely a breath. "My father." Before Sarah could process those two weighted words, a black SUV rolled to a stop across the avenue. Its headlights carved through the rain like knives. The engine quieted, but the tension in the diner rose in its place, sharp and electric. "Sarah," old Mr. Jenkins muttered from his stool, "you should shut the door." But she didn't move. She watched the SUV door swing open. A tall man stepped out, dressed in a charcoal coat that seemed immune to the rain. Behind him, 4 men unfolded from the vehicle, broad-shouldered, hard-faced, scanning the street with a precision that didn't belong anywhere near a breakfast counter. The child's breath hitched. She curled tight against the wall. Sarah placed a hand on the table. "You're safe here. I'm not letting anyone take you." The girl shook her head fiercely. "You don't understand. He will." The bell above the door chimed, not gently this time, but like it feared the man forcing it to ring. Arthur Sterling entered with the calm menace of someone used to owning everything he touched. His presence pressed down on the room, squeezing oxygen from the air. "Where is she?" he asked, not yelling, not even raising his voice, but sending a shiver through every patron. Sarah stood between him and the back booths. The coffee pot trembled in her grip. "Sir, you should leave. There's no one here for you." Arthur tilted his head with a faint, mocking smile. "Is that so?" His men fanned out. One approached the counter, another swept the tables, another checked the restrooms. Every heavy step made the diner feel smaller. The girl ducked under the table, but Arthur's gaze narrowed, tracking the movement like a hunting dog catching a scent. He moved toward Sarah again, stopping only when he was close enough that she could see the cold calculation in his eyes. "I've run this city for 20 years, he murmured. "Don't insult me by pretending an 8-year-old wandered into this dump by accident." "She's scared of you," Sarah said, her voice sharper than she intended. "That's all I need to know." The room froze. Even the storm went quiet. Arthur leaned in. "Then you know nothing at all." At that moment a guard called out, "Sir." "Maintenance hatch." Someone opened it. Arthur's expression cracked, just slightly, but it was enough. He snapped toward his men. "Find her. Now." The guards surged toward the kitchen, their boots slamming against the old linoleum. Sarah made her move, slipping behind the counter and into the narrow pantry, heart pounding. She yanked open the floor hatch, and there she found the girl, knees to chest, clutching a silver-plated flash drive like it was the last piece of her identity. "We need to go," Sarah whispered. The girl grabbed her hand without hesitation. They crawled through the service shaft, emerging into the kitchen through a rusted vent. Above them, the muffled thunder of boots shook the floor. Sarah pointed toward the industrial hood. Up, she mouthed. Together they climbed, the metal cold, slippery, unforgiving. Sarah pushed the child into the duct first and followed just as the kitchen door burst open beneath them. Shouts erupted, echoing through the vents, but the two kept crawling until fresh air burst through the roof hatch. Rain hammered the rooftop, drenching them instantly. Can you climb down the fire escape? Sarah shouted over the wind. The girl wiped water from her face. If you hold my hand. They descended into a narrow alley, sprinting across puddles until they reached the street behind the diner. Sarah's old Corolla sat crooked along the curb like a stubborn mule refusing to die. They threw themselves inside. Where do we go? Sarah gasped. The girl opened her palm, revealing the flash drive. Somewhere he can't track. Somewhere we can open this. Sarah didn't understand, but she didn't need to. She turned the key. The engine coughed awake. In the rearview mirror, the Escalade swerved into the alley. Hold on. The Corolla shot forward, its tires skidding through the rain as they raced through South Boston's maze of streets. The child's small fingers dug into the seat as headlights flared behind them. Left, she cried. Sarah cut the wheel. They barreled onto a wider road, weaving between trucks and early commuters. Every moment they gained, the Escalade matched. Every turn they took, it followed. Sarah whispered more to herself than to the girl. This isn't a chase. It's a hunt. They reached Quincy 20 minutes later, the Corolla wheezing as if begging for rest. Sarah pulled into the garage where her cousin Eddie worked. He stepped out from under a half-repaired Chevy, grease up to his elbows. Sarah. What? No time, she said. We need the cage. He stared at the girl, rain-soaked and wild-eyed. Something in her expression told him this was no ordinary emergency. He nodded solemnly and led them into the back. The Faraday cage sealed around them with a metallic clang. For a brief second, silence felt like oxygen. The girl plugged the drive into the isolated laptop, code exploding across the screen. Sarah watched the transformation, fear melting into laser focus. You know what you're doing? She asked. I know what he's hiding, the girl replied. But the lights flickered. Someone outside overrode the breakers. The electronic lock clicked. Eddie stepped back in, not alone. Behind him stood Arthur Sterling and his guards. Eddie looked terrified, holding his hands up. They said you kidnapped her, he stammered. They said you hurt a child. Sarah. $1 million. Arthur's voice cut through the tension. Enough. Bring me the girl. She's not going anywhere, Sarah said, placing herself between them. Arthur sighed. Misplaced bravery, Miss Mitchell. Step aside. She's not your property. She's my daughter, Arthur snapped. The child flinched at that word. Arthur softened his tone, not out of love but control. Come, Maya. You've caused enough trouble. Maya whispered. No. Arthur's jaw tightened. Fine. Force it. Graves, the scarred guard, lunged. Sarah grabbed the nearest can, brake cleaner, and sprayed it into his eyes. He roared, stumbling back, knocking into a rack of tools. Chaos erupted. Maya scrambled up the shelves toward the ceiling. Sarah swung a torque wrench at another guard, buying seconds, not minutes. Maya! Sarah yelled. Go! But Maya wasn't running. She was reaching for the fire suppression valve. A second later, the entire system detonated, dumping gallons of oily black water across the floor. Arthur slipped, cursing. The guards lost footing. Sarah seized the moment. She climbed the shelves, following the girl toward the skylight. They pushed through onto the roof, then leapt to the next building. Sarah's shin cracked against the ledge, but she pulled herself up. They ran, limping, drenched, terrified but alive. Hours later, they hid in a subway station beneath the city's restless hum. Sarah wrapped her torn apron around her leg. Maya stared at the flash drive. What's on it? Sarah asked gently. Proof, Maya whispered. He built a system that kills without understanding. And he's selling it. Then we expose him. Maya looked up. We'd need a broadcast tower. Studio. Something big. Sarah nodded slowly. Then we go big. They made their way to WBZ Studios under the cover of night. The plan was reckless. Downright impossible. But desperation makes ordinary people fearless. Sarah stole 2 delivery jackets, packed empty pizza boxes, and smuggled Maya inside. The security guard barely looked up. "Delivery for night crew," Sarah said, lowering her voice. He waved her through. Down the hall, Maya crawled out of the boxes. They moved fast toward the elevators. But when the doors slid open on the wrong floor, Arthur Sterling stood waiting, holding a pistol. "You too," he whispered, "have made my evening very inconvenient." He raised the gun. The weapon jammed. Sarah slammed the elevator button. The doors closed on Arthur's furious face, and the elevator rocketed upward. They burst into master control. Technicians scattered at the sight of them. Maya plugged the drive into the main console. Arthur and the guards battered the door. "How long?" Sarah cried. 2 minutes. The hinges cracked. Maya rerouted the signal. Sarah fought the guards as they forced their way in, swinging a fire extinguisher with every ounce of strength she had left. A gun discharged, shattering a monitor. "Done!" Maya yelled. "It's live!" The screens filled with black and white test footage. Children boarding a bus, a drone locking onto them, and Arthur's own voice saying, "Collateral damage is acceptable. Burn the logs." The newsroom stopped. Phones rang. News anchors stared at the screens in horror. Arthur staggered back as if the truth itself pushed him. His empire crumbled in real time. Graves looked at the footage, then at Arthur. "I have a daughter," he muttered. He dropped his badge and walked out. Sirens blared outside. The FBI stormed the building moments later. Arthur, soaked, wild-eyed, cornered at last, tried to speak, tried to buy forgiveness, but no one listened. They cuffed him, read him his rights, and marched him past every reporter he once controlled. Maya stood beside Sarah, trembling but unbroken. Sarah rested a hand on her shoulder. "It's over." "It's not," Maya whispered. "Not until he's really gone." But when the elevators closed around Arthur Sterling, when the cameras captured his downfall, when the city finally saw what he had done, Maya exhaled for the first time like a child. And the story wasn't finished yet. The final reckoning was still to come. In the weeks that followed, Sarah learned how quickly a city can shift when the truth is no longer buried. Headlines filled the morning air, not with fear, but with the relief of a wound finally named. People approached her at the diner, some quietly grateful, others simply curious how an ordinary server managed to bring down a man no one dared challenge. She never offered the full story. She only said, "Someone needed help and I was there." Maya settled into a steadier rhythm of childhood, leaving coded sketches on the counter whenever Sarah worked the morning shift. Each one carried a small detail: an open gate, a rising sun, a bird finally in flight. Those drawings told Sarah more than any words could. The girl was mending, piece by piece. One evening, as the diner lights glowed warm against the dark, Sarah stepped outside and saw Maya racing across the sidewalk, laughing as if the world had never once tried to claim her. That sound, bright, unguarded, reminded Sarah what courage had cost her and what it had given back. Change, she realized, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through small acts that refuse to break. If this story moved you, please like, share, and help our community grow by subscribing to Canada's Heartfelt Tales. Your support keeps these stories alive.